Nadia Voss had learned, a long time ago, that the best way to survive was to take up as little space as possible. She kept her shoulders pulled in when she walked. She spoke only when someone spoke to her first. In the Iron Vale Pack's manor house, where she had worked since she was 16, she moved through the kitchen like a shadow, present enough to be useful, invisible enough to be forgotten the moment she left the room. It was not a sad life. She had stopped calling it that years ago. It was simply her life, and she carried it the way you carry a stone in your shoe. You stop noticing after a while. She was 22 when her name appeared on the list. She found out the way she found out most things, not because anyone told her directly, but because she overheard it. The Pack's alpha, a heavy man named Duran with small eyes and a loud voice, was talking to his head of staff in the corridor outside the supply room. Iron Vale needs to send 8 females to the King's Palace for service review, Duran said. Write up the list. Include the Voss girl. Nadia? The staff head sounded uncertain. She's kitchen staff. She's not trained for palace service. She doesn't have to be trained. She just has to fill a number. Nadia stood very still in the supply room, with a sack of flour in her arms, and said nothing. She had been filling numbers her whole life. This was not new. The transport to the Alpha King's fortress took 2 days. She sat near the window of the van and watched the landscape change, the flat farmland of Iron Vale giving way to hills, then to something darker and older, pine forests pressing close on both sides of the road, the sky narrowing to a gray strip above them. The other women on the transport talked among themselves. A few of them had packed matching luggage. One of them, a girl named Priya, with sharp cheekbones and a sharp mouth to match, had told Nadia before departure that she should try to look more presentable. Nadia had thanked her, and changed nothing. The fortress appeared above the trees before the road even reached it. Stone walls the color of old iron, towers that seemed too tall, a gate wide enough to drive 4 vehicles through side by side. It was not the kind of place that was built for beauty. It was built to say something. It said it loudly. They were escorted through the main gate in a line. Palace staff received them, checked names against a list, and began directing them toward the east wing. Nadia was near the back of the group, her one bag over her shoulder, watching the way the stone absorbed sound. Even 12 women walking together made almost no echo. Then she saw the wolf. He was chained at the base of the great hall's entrance. A silver creature, enormous. The kind of size that stops being impressive and starts being something else. Something that sits lower in the chest. His eyes were pale gold. He was very still. The first woman passed him, then the second, third, fourth, fifth. He watched them all with the flat, professional attention of something doing a job. When Nadia came level with him, he stood. All 4 legs, head raising. Both chains pulled tight with a sound like a bell being struck. His pale gold eyes found her, and stayed there. Nobody moved for a moment. The palace staff exchanged looks. A guard reached for the chains, reassured himself they held, and said nothing. Nadia looked back at the wolf, because it seemed rude not to. His gaze was not aggressive. It was not frightening, exactly. It was the way someone looks at a person they have been waiting for, without knowing they were waiting. She was moved to a different wing than the others. No explanation was given. She learned the palace the way she had learned the manor kitchen, through repetition and observation, finding the patterns, working within them. She was assigned to household staff, linen rotation, morning supply runs, document archiving in the East Tower, tasks that required presence and reliability but not conversation. She was good at them. The king she saw rarely, and always at a distance. Alpha King Cassian Vale was the kind of person who changed the air in a room, not loudly, not through any performance of dominance. Simply by existing in a space, he made that space arrange itself around him. He was tall, dark-haired, with the specific kind of stillness that comes not from peace, but from long practice at controlling something restless underneath. His face was careful, his eyes noticed things. He was also, as far as Nadia could observe, deeply and deliberately alone. His advisors moved around him in orbits, but never close. His palace staff addressed him with their eyes slightly lowered. Even the senior court members, men and women who had served for decades, spoke to him as though measuring each word before it left their mouths. She thought, in those first days, that he simply had that effect on everyone. Then she began noticing other things. The first morning she used the east garden, a walled square of gravel and winter-bare hedges that she had found empty at 5 in the morning. She was alone for exactly 4 minutes before she heard the side gate open. She did not look up. She heard footsteps stop. She heard them, after a long moment, turn and leave. She found a different garden the following morning. He was there when she arrived. He was standing with his back to the entrance, looking at the far wall, and he did not turn around when she came through the gate. She stopped. She considered leaving. She stayed, because she had already decided this was where she would have her morning tea, and she did not think it was reasonable to give that up. She sat on the stone bench in the far corner. He stood where he was standing. They existed in the same space for 20 minutes without speaking, and then he left. This happened, with small variations, 5 more times over the following 2 weeks. He never started a conversation. She noticed that he was always already there when she arrived, no matter how she varied her time. She noticed that the silver wolf began appearing at the garden gate, lying down outside it, during these mornings. She noticed that Cassian, who by all accounts worked from before dawn until past midnight, seemed to have developed a habit of standing in whichever quiet corner she had recently discovered. She did not know what to do with this. She did what she always did with things she did not know how to carry. She kept moving, and waited to understand later. The accusation came on a Thursday. She was called to the throne room by 2 palace guards who knocked on her chamber door before breakfast and told her to come with them immediately. They were polite about it. That was somehow worse. The throne room was full. Not crowded, full in the specific way of a room where everyone present has a role to perform. Advisors along both walls. 2 men she did not recognize, standing near the front, with the posture of people who had arranged this carefully. Cassian, on the raised platform at the far end, reading something in his hand. The charge was read aloud by a thin man with a silver chain of office around his neck, Nadia Voss, placed in the palace under false documentation, suspected of information gathering on behalf of a northern rival pack, recommended for immediate removal and investigation. She stood in the center of the room and listened to all of it. When the thin man finished, the room was quiet. Cassian had not looked up from the document in his hand. She thought about several things she could say. She thought about explaining herself, defending herself, listing the facts of her empty and unremarkable life as evidence that she had nothing to offer any spy network anywhere. She thought about all of it, and then she set it aside. "I have nothing," she said, into the quiet. "I came from nothing. I have no pack loyalty because no pack has shown me any. What would I even be selling?" It was not a speech. It was just true. And she was tired. And it came out flat and without drama. And somehow that made it land harder than anything prepared would have. The room shifted slightly. Cassian set the document down. He looked at the 2 men near the front. He looked, slowly, around the room. Then he said 2 words: "Leave, everyone." The room did not argue with him. It emptied. When the last advisor had closed the door behind them, the room was very large and very quiet, and it was only the 2 of them in it. He came down from the platform and crossed the floor and stopped about 2 feet in front of her. He was close enough that she could see the precise color of his eyes, which were a gray so dark they were nearly black, and which were looking at her with the same expression the wolf had used the night she arrived, the expression that was not a question. He said her name. Just that. Just Nadia. Like he had been holding it. She felt something go very still inside her. Not fear, not the kind of feeling she had a word for yet, something that sat at the exact center of her chest and did not move. "You knew," she said. It was not an accusation. It was a recognition. "My wolf knew," he said. "The first night. I have been—" He stopped. He chose the next word as though it cost him something. "Adjusting." She looked at him for a moment. To what? To the fact that I was wrong about what I wanted. He told her the rest across several evenings in the same walled garden. Not all at once. He was not a person who could do things all at once. His younger brother had died 7 years ago. Enemies who could not reach Cassian had reached the person Cassian had openly loved. He had responded by becoming unreachable. He had built the distance into himself the way you build walls into a house, deliberately, structurally, so that removing them would compromise everything else. He told her this without self-pity, without asking for anything in return. She recognized that quality. She had it herself. She told him what her life had looked like, the manor kitchen, the flour sacks and the steam, and the sound of her name being written on lists by people who saw her as a unit of logistics. She told him she was not afraid of being wanted. She was afraid of learning to want back, and having that turn into something that could be used against her. He was quiet after she said that for long enough that she heard the wind cross the garden. "That is exactly what I have been afraid of," he said. Two people. The same wound. Different scars. The men who had filed the accusation, she learned later their names, their alliances, the political marriages that would collapse if Cassian chose a mate outside their arrangements. Made one more move the following week. A formal council vote. Forged documentation, the kind of thing that was hard to undo once it began moving. Cassian stood before the council and read the motion. He set it down on the table in front of him and looked, one by one, at the faces in the room. "She stays," he said. His voice was level. "And I want it clearly understood that the people who put this motion forward have told me something important about themselves." That was all. The room understood. Two of the opposing lords shifted their positions before the week was out. Power consolidates toward certainty. Cassian being certain about something was enough. He came to the garden the following morning at 5, like always. She was already there, like always. The silver wolf was outside the gate, lying down with his chin on his paws, like always. "I want to ask you something," Cassian said. He was standing in his usual place, hands behind his back, looking at her, with that careful, honest expression he had when he was not performing anything. "Ask," she said. "I want to offer the bond, not because the wolf decided, not because I owe you anything for what they put you through. Because I have spent 7 years building a life where nothing could reach me, and you reached me by carrying linen down a corridor and looking at the wolf like it was reasonable to make eye contact with something that size." He stopped. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile, but the shape of one. "I would like to stop building walls now." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the supply room and the flour sack, and her name being written on a list by a man who could not have picked her out of a crowd. She thought about 2 days in a van, and a fortress that swallowed sound, and a wolf who stood up when she walked past, like he had been waiting for exactly her. She thought about a man who had made himself into a fortress for 7 years, and had spent 3 weeks standing quietly in gardens, not knowing how to begin. "Yes," she said. Not because the wolf had recognized her. Not because she had been forced into his castle and had nowhere else to go. But because she had watched him, this careful, guarded, deliberate man, take himself apart very slowly for her specifically, and she had decided that someone who worked that hard to reach her was someone worth reaching back for. The wolf outside the gate stood up. He did not make a sound. He turned in a slow circle and lay back down, and in the pale early morning light of the mountain garden, with the stone walls still holding the cold of the night, Nadia Voss let herself take up exactly as much space as she needed, which, it turned out, was the same space as a king.